Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Church. I'm with our host today, my office, the Office of Sustainability at Alameda County General Services Agency. Today, we'll be discussing a green building strategy, sourcing low carbon materials from concrete to insulation and beyond as a part of the Alameda County General Services Agency's Green Purchasing Roundtable series. And we'll talk more about it all. Next slide, please. If you haven't gotten the chance, please do rename yourself in the Zoom, add your name and the name of your company. And if you haven't gotten the chance to fill out our quick survey, it'll be a big help to us, about 2 minutes. So please do so with the QR code or using the link in the chat. Next slide. Our agenda today, we'll do this welcome that we're in right now and a little bit of housekeeping. We'll spend a lot of good time listening to a lot of content in a short segment, a presentation about low carbon building materials. We'll get a chance to answer your questions. And then we have some questions for you to learn about low carbon building materials, how you might adopt them in your practices and in your business. We'll give you some links to resources that might be of use to you and close. Next slide. And we're grateful to have our presenters today, my colleague Karen Cook from the Alameda County General Services Agency, and Francis Yang and Spencer Schrant from consulting firm Arup, the author of the specifications that we'll look at today. Next slide. So we encourage you to participate today. Use the raise hand feature or chat to ask or answer questions. We'll have a lot of conversation between us. Please feel free to enable your video, say hello to the group, and stay on mute if you're not speaking so we can hear everyone clearly. We will be recording and the recording will be shared. And as I mentioned, please do change your Zoom name so that we can see your name and business name. Next slide. We will be sharing with all of you if you registered for this event, you got in the door, and so you will receive the draft specifications for low carbon building materials that we have to share a recording, link to the recording and the slides so you can access all of this material. Next slide, please. And I'll pass things now to my colleague Karen at Alameda County General Services Agency.
Thank you, Sarah. Pleased to be here this morning with all of you. My name is Karen Cook. I'm a project manager here with the Office of Sustainability in the General Services Agency. And I want to start today by acknowledging our project partners. So GSA, it plans, builds, and maintains county buildings. And we're looking forward to using these specifications in our construction projects. And we also hope this specification will serve as a model for other public agency. And that's why your input is really important. We want to make sure this works for our business community in Alameda County and beyond. So Arup is our project consultant. They've been instrumental in developing the technical specifications, doing all the hard, heavy lifting and research. And Stop Waste is our generous funder for the project. So thank you all to the partners. So we're going to do a little bit of, I'll do a little bit of level setting on green building and why this is an important project for us. And then we'll hand it over to Arup for the bulk of the presentation. So green building is a green building is a structure that's designed and built to be environmentally responsible and resource efficient throughout its entire life cycle, from where it's sited to its deconstruction. And the focus of green building strategies has really changed over time. From early days, C&D recycling and energy efficiency, all these are very important aspects still that we focus on. But the leading edge of green building policy is around low carbon materials right now. So we know that the green building industry is growing every year, and this is just one measure, but if we look at the number of projects being certified to LEED, which is a commonly used multi-attribute standard, we see it's growing year over year. So we want to, make sure the entire industry comes along with this work, and we hope that this supports you in doing that. And as a government agency, it's really imperative that we act as leaders, as the impacts of climate change are harming our community, especially those that are most vulnerable. We've all experienced an increasing number of record high temperatures and record rainfall events in recent years, in addition to increased smoke pollution from wildfires nearby. And these events not only affect our community, but they also may be affecting your business, your family, and your health. So analysis from the Carbon Leadership Forum shows that building materials are a sizable part of the picture when it comes to contributing to climate change. Emissions from the building and infrastructure materials sectors comprise 17% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So here's our opportunity statement. We have some great opportunity to make an impact. So we can make that impact across multiple stages in the building life cycle, as you can see laid out here in this simplified diagram. In today's presentation, we're really going to focus on the low carbon material construction specification, which we're presenting, which address the emissions from the product and construction phase of the project. But I do want to acknowledge that we're also working with Arup and Stop Waste to draft building material reuse specification that also addresses emissions from the same stages of the building life cycle. So we're not going to cover that in today's presentation, but if this is a particular interest to you, please let us know, and we'd be happy to get your feedback on that as well. So, we are continuing in GSA to work on other projects that tackle energy efficiency, on-site renewable, and other things, other green initiatives. But yeah, today's focus is really on these low carbon materials and getting your feedback so we can ensure we are meeting the needs of our local business community. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Francis from Arup to take us through some of the more technical aspects of the specification, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear your questions and go from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you for joining everybody. Good morning. Yes, so I'm going to go into some of the more specifics with the low carbon materials performance specification, which is in would appear in the Division 1 specification, right alongside the more general sustainability requirements. So the first thing I'm sure you're wondering is which materials are we talking about here? Which materials are going to need to comply with the new requirements? So we have here, as you see on the left, the materials listed. These are some of the higher volume materials used in construction and pretty common. Also, what we have identified as the higher impact in terms of the embodied carbon or those emissions that are generated in the manufacture of these building products. So you'll see, asphalt, flat glass, and we'll clarify that a little more. CMU, concrete, both precast and cast in place. Different kinds of insulation, and these are categorized in their use. And we'll describe that a little more in terms of which types of insulation that really encompasses. And then sorts of steel products, as well as rebar. So then you'll see in the next is the quantity minimums, and those might be a little difficult to get your head around. So we've also added these comparisons just to give a sense of how much of material you would have on a project before the requirements are triggered. And a lot of these quantity minimums come from existing thresholds that are in other policies, either DOT or by clean, or we've aligned them to be close to other numbers we see elsewhere. Okay, so hope that gives you a sense first. We're also using this term global warming potential. This is when we're going to be talking about where we have additionally limits on the embodied carbon of these building products. And global warming potential is it's a scientific term for embodied carbon, and it refers to the total greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with the production of a product. Um, well, it can also be really associated with any greenhouse gases, but when for this context, we're talking about the production of the product, like Karen had said, the product and construction phases of a building life cycle. So these are the upstream activities of extraction, notation of raw materials, and the manufacturing and the processing, and then getting them to normally be getting them to site as well. But in this case, you'll see it's really the product, and we'll be using something called a tool called environmental product declarations, which is just capturing the product emissions. Okay, next. So this is an example of an environmental product declaration. So some people call it like the nutrition facts for products, and it's very much like that, except that it reports the environmental impacts. So global warming potential is just one of them. You'll see many others listed here that have to do with other kinds of detrimental, effects on the environment. But we're really just focused on the global warming potential, as that is a very, urgent and pressing matter for our planet right now. Just gonna go over the product specific versus industry average. So these EPDs are generated from a life cycle assessment, which we'll call an LCA, which is a method of calculating, accounting for these impacts, considering the resources taken from the earth and energy used, and then the pollution that comes out of the process. And then product specific is where a manufacturer has done one of these or a specific product, whereas industry-wide is when usually the whole association for that type of product collects information from a whole bunch of its members and then produces an industry average, kind of representing a typical for that product. So we are setting some global warming potential limits, and EPDs are what are used to disclose and verify your products are meeting the limits. So those would be submitted with with the other kinds of submittals during the construction administration phase. And also just to clarify that in coming up with these global warming potential limits, we were very conscious of these four things in particular, aligning with state and local thresholds where we could, and we thought that was reasonable for Alameda County's types of projects. Also aligning with LEED requirements, availability in the local marketplace. We did a lot of analysis and counts, and then preparing for future REACH codes. So trying to keep an eye on, how quickly we need to be decarbonizing the products in our buildings. So here are the limits now. You'll see that there are two materials that actually don't have limits yet, the asphalt and precast, and we felt that was because the important thing to do right now is to just be collecting the environmental product declarations for these products. Their industry benchmarks that are not granular enough or differentiating enough to really help us with setting limits, we thought. And so right now we're kind of in data collection mode for those. But other ones, you see the limits here, and these are expressed in kilograms of CO2 equivalents, and per some kind of functional unit of or declared unit of the product. So for glass, it's in mass, in for insulation, it's on an area basis, but also considering the the resistivity, the R value essentially of the insulation, and then for steel is also by mass. And then when I mentioned the analysis we did that's shown on the right, that shows where you looked into an EPD database and have a count of the number of compliant EPDs for these types of products, also the percentage compared to what is in the database, and then a listing of several of the manufacturers. So this is not exhaustive. There are manufacturers who choose not to put their EPDs into that database. And there's also the option to request the EPDs from a manufacturer. Maybe they don't have one generated yet for that particular product, or maybe they're even in the process of coming up with EPDs and they just don't have them available yet. So we also encourage, outreach to the manufacturers to actually encourage them to produce product-specific EPDs or be part of an industry average reporting cycle. And one last thing I'm going to point out is with going back to that glass, this is for annealed uncoated glass because we realize glass, the end product, it comes in so many different forms within an assembly or different kinds of treatments and coatings, and we didn't want to limit those things you need for the performance of the glass. We realize that is really important. And this is where you'd have to ask the contractor for the glass to ask for the glass that was uncoated and annealed that went into the assembly. And yeah, so I think the next slide actually shows that a little bit more too.
Yeah, but if I could just interject, I think at this stage we wanted to ask in folks, if you open up your chat, you'll see a question in there.
Thanks.
We want to know, are these reflecting the manufacturers that you're commonly sourcing materials from? If you work in one of these areas and you're installing products that are not, and you're not seeing the manufacturers that you typically work with, if you wouldn't mind just throwing the name of that manufacturer in the chat, that would be helpful to us. Anything else on that? Okay, great. So yeah, just pop those in the chat as we continue on, and I'll move us along now.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is just an example of the kind of analysis we did, looking at the EPDs available and the global potential limits reported on them. And again, this is just for 3 of manufacturers that we know of, and then comparing that to the industry average, National Glass Association. For glass, we set the limit to be aligned with that national average. And then any manufacturers that were part of the reporting for that industry average, they are listed either in the EPD itself or on the website that you would find the EPD, and that would count as well. Now that we know that there are others who make glass and even have product specific, so again that there could be more compliant products or maybe some non-compliant that are just not shown in that database. For concrete, it's a little bit more nuanced with the national industry average EPD. The global warming potential is actually reported by strength. And then there's also a division between normal weight concrete and lightweight concrete. So here, these limits are aligned with the ones adopted by Marin County. And they are generally 30% to 10% lower than national average. And in this case, with that work in developing the limits, there was an enormous study and stakeholder process done with the 3 suppliers here that are that supply most of the concrete in the Bay Area. And there's an enormous amount of EPDs from them as well. I mean, there's so many variations of concrete mixes, but that also gives the ounce and percent compliance also give an idea of, again, in that database, how many you can find and the likelihood of it being compliant. And then with CMU, we wanted just to explain how we recognize that CMU, there's two major components, the block and the grout. So there is there's a limit for the assembly. So there's a calculation that would need to be done considering the global warming potential of the two separate products and then coming together and the proportion of them in the compliance form that will provide. There's an automatic calculation for you to do this, but you do need to just know the percent of the amount of grout in the then the global warming potential of the block and the grout, or even the cement content of the block and then the grout. And then lastly, to explain these, for insulation, we took a approach of thinking about insulation in these 5 categories of use. So roof insulation, exterior continuous insulation, exterior sidewall, cavities, curtain wall, spandrels, and then below grade, because we recognize that you can't use any insulation for any given use. There are specific types that are necessary or and most fitting, for either the compressive strength or water getting water out to and not degrading because of the thermal resistivity not to be degraded by the water. Yeah, our facades team helped with identifying which products are actually options for these categories, and then we used the industry average numbers for those to come up with the limit. We were also quite conservative as there are some really low GWP options, but we know they're not used in a widespread way yet, like timber board and loose fill timber. So we show them as options here. They would definitely comply, but we didn't factor them into the calculation of the limits. And then we added one more buffer on top of that, which is to give another 25% allowance over that, because we do realize this is a newer product to introduce as with limits to buildings. Okay,
Right.
so I'm going to turn it over to Spencer, who will explain some of the compliance forms.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. So that is great background. To start, I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline for how this all goes down. So we have a compliance form, and that template will be provided in the RFP by the county. It looks similar to what we see in the screenshot below. What's shown here is the form for concrete, and this form would be completed at multiple stages throughout the project. So at 90% SD, there's really just a checkbox that says, here are the materials that I expect to exceed the quantity minimums that Francis was talking about earlier, and acknowledging that for each of those materials, you will be in compliance with the GWP limits. And at 90% DD and 90% CD, the design builder would update and complete the preliminary compliance check, which is the left half of this form here, with their expected quantities and materials and GWP from the product EPD. Within 30 days of bid award, the subcontractor would do their first pass of the as-built compliance check, maybe updating some of the volumes and GWP from products that they might have chosen to go with, which may or may not be the same as the products specified in the preliminary compliance check. And then within 6 weeks of completion of all work with covered materials, they would submit the final updated version of the as-built compliance check with as-built information on quantities and GWP. And this next page, I think next slide, really shows that same thing. I don't think we have enough time to go through what that form looks like, but this is pretty much what it looks like for each of the materials, and there's a different sheet in the form for each of the materials that Francis was talking about beforehand. I think we'll move on to Q&A at this point.
Great, thanks. And yeah, we can certainly open up that the compliance form a little later if as we move through our but we do want to make sure we have time for Q&A and some discussion with folks on the line. So I'm going to hand it back to Sarah and let her run us through that, and we'll see if we have time later to look at that in a little more detail.
Great. Yes. And thanks so much, Spencer and Francis and Karen, for walking us through all that content. And you may have some questions that resulted. They covered a lot of ground. So please do share your questions either aloud, you can unmute and share your question, or share it in chat. And if one of your questions is about taking a look at the compliance form, feel free to say that and we can we can slip that in. I'll give a moment for people to think of their questions. Hi, Joyce, you came off mute. Do you have a question?
No, I'm not graphing maybe. Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, I was late. I was in a meeting.
That's fine. We're in the question and answer period, but there will be a recording available of the presentation if you want to see it. And there'll be some great questions coming up. So,
okay.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Questions for you coming up, I should say.
Okay.
But right now we're hearing from the group if any questions came up as you saw the presentation. There's obviously a lot more to share than we were able to cover in this presentation. But as we said, we will be sharing with you the draft specifications. You can take a look. And we have Eric on the line now for additional questions you may have on your mind.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, it doesn't seem like there are tons of questions coming up. Do we want to go ahead and try sharing the forms briefly now? Or should we get to our questions for the group first? We had a couple just join, so it may be useful to show the forms so that they can generate questions. Oh yeah, David, hello.
Yes, this is just an off-note question, but interested in Arab. I mean, I've seen the sign in downtown LA at the Intercontinental building. What's your guys' affiliation with that building? Are you guys bought that building or was part of the construction of that building? Just curious.
Yeah, we're merely a tenant of the office side of the building, not the hotel. But yeah, we're just a tenant.
Understood. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, if there's no more questions right now, I could flash up the compliance form quickly. just
Yeah,
to
that's
show.
great. I think it's always good to see what you all would be working with.
All right, I will find the stop share screen. And let you take over, Spencer.
All right, thank you. So this is the form, kind of starting left to right in these tabs. This was the sign off at schematic design phase that I was talking about, where you could select whether you're not expected or expected to exceed quantity thresholds for these different materials.
Zoom
And
in some more,
Spencer,
Spencer.
are you able,
oh,
yeah, be able
thank
to
you.
zoom in? It's real tiny.
Yeah, good feedback.
Thanks.
And then on the next slide here, the project info, this has kind of where you'd sign off at each of those different phases. Um, once you've completed the update and filling out all of your information, quantities, and EPD values, as well as instructions for what that looks like. And we've referenced these quantity minimums, which are located in the spec, but also located here for reference.
Spencer, let's pause there, and maybe you can blow up your screen even bigger on the quantity minimums. And
Yeah,
maybe this would be a good time to launch a poll on for the folks in the room who are supplying these products, are you mostly doing projects that meet these quantity minimums? Or let's see, what are the, Sarah, do you want to run through the poll questions? There it is.
Yes, are you seeing the poll now?
Yes.
Great. So taking a look at, if you can get even bigger, Spencer, I know it's probably
yeah,
giant
sure.
on your screen, but tiny for us. Wonderful. So if you think about the projects that you do they meet these quantity thresholds? Are they smaller or bigger? So if they are, okay, great. People are answering. We have some saying that all meet the quantity minimum and some do not know. Great. Yeah, really helpful to have these answers. Gonna see if we wait for another moment if we get any more on the line. Any more responses here. Great. You can see the quantities there. Okay, great. I'm gonna end the poll. Just a moment. One last minute. Okay, here we go. Okay, great. And so you can see the results here that not everyone is aware how many of the projects would meet the quantity thresholds, but for some it's all.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in with that, Paul. This is a great time to look at that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if not know if anyone's willing to put in the chat if there's anything we could do to help you um or just the nature of not knowing is more like just not being able to know off the top of your head. You'd have to go back through past projects to find to look at it or think about it, or is there some other kind of barrier to not being sure? Um, yeah, if anyone wants to help us understand that more in the chat.
That's great, and that's a great dovetail as well, Francis, into our next question. So feel free to answer. I'm going to give you a chance to answer in the chat. Is there anything we could do to help you understand that? And as we do so, as you think about that, Karen, what do you think if we go to our first question for the group? Because this seems to be related. Is there something
Well,
else you wanted to do before we get there?
let's just let Spencer have just one more moment
Oh,
with
sure.
this sheet, and then we'll move to our discussion questions. Yep.
Sure. Yeah, this GWP limits is not any new information either. This is merely for reference and is also all located in the specs, low carbon material specs. And then really these 5 tabs here are where all of the work is really going to be done. So I think let's take a look at, I think steel is pretty typical for most of the materials. Um, and maybe I'll zoom in and we can pan left to right. All these yellow highlighted cells are for the user to input, so they could have a product name, product category, and all these white cells are going to be auto-calculated based on the product category and other user inputs. They would then input the estimated quantity and manufacturer information if available, and link to the EPD and product GWP. Then there's this calculation which checks, is that in compliance with the specs or maybe not? Um, as I mentioned before, the preliminary compliance check and the as-built compliance check, quantities do not have to be, or GWP values do not have to be identical. This is more for us to track whether maybe how quantities are changing throughout the phase of the project and through construction. And for all of these columns where we have a number in parentheses there, we have notes for clarification on what either what the calculation is doing or what needs to be filled in by the user. The 2 that maybe I'll talk about a little bit differently are CMU and cast in place concrete, where these you do have the option to meet the GWP limit for each mix, but there's also an option to maybe you're a little bit higher on one mix, but then lower on other mixes, as long as the total GWP of all concrete expected on the project comes out to be a smaller global warming potential than the allowable total GWP based on the quantities and strengths that you have. And I think that's all explained pretty well in the specifications too.
Great. Thank you, Spencer. And I know we had a couple of people just join, so I want to let you all know we are recording this session. You'll be able to view it. You'll get an email with the link to the video. But just to quickly state, we're here to hear your feedback and your questions about a specification that Alameda County General Services Agency is developing for our construction projects, focusing on the biggest construction projects. And we're developing performance specifications for the types of materials that would go are typical in a construction project, as we've talked about using this form. So we are going to go to a few questions now, and I can share my screen again. And I'm going to come down to the there we go.
That's great. Thanks, Karen. So this is the time when we get to hear from all of you. As Karen mentioned, we are really interested to hear what barriers might come up or how does this hit you? We want to know when you go out to source low carbon materials, or you might be interested to do so in fulfillment of a contract or a relationship with a prime contractor, what barriers would you encounter, do you think? What information would you need? And what more do you need to know to compete successfully as a subcontractor for projects? We're really glad that we got to have this event to speak to you specifically and hear about any barriers you might have. The as we've mentioned, the specification is still in progress. It's in draft form, so we can make changes reflecting the needs of all the people who will be using it, all the businesses that will be wanting to meet this standard. So, well, I'll open the floor. Please feel free to answer in the chat or speak up and unmute yourself. The floor is yours. And as Francis was mentioning earlier, the not knowing sort of the relationship between the minimums in the standard and the work that you all do, that may be one barrier. It's just understanding which of your projects would need to source low carbon materials if you were working with someone with a prime who is interested in that. Leaving some extra time here for folks to respond. We're glad if there are no barriers and no further information you need. We know it's a complex proposal, so. Okay, David, thank you in the chat. Let's see. Not enough testing done on materials, but yeah, that's really interesting. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, David? Not to put you on the spot, but I think it would be useful for us to know what kind of testing you would love to see. Yeah, maybe that would be um, durability testing or performance testing. What, Francis, did you have a thought?
Oh, no, I was just noticing that he had clarified that I think he means to say not enough testing done on materials by manufacturer. But yeah, you probably figured that out. Yeah, but I also am curious if you mean the kind of the performance attributes of the products, yeah, like durability or uh, uh, impermeability, thermal resistance, strength, all sorts of things, or is it are you referring more to the actual embodied carbon values and whether they're reliable? Yeah, also very curious if you would love to hear more on what you're thinking. Okay.
Everything. Yep. Can understand that for sure. Thanks for sharing that. And welcoming any more barriers that may have prompted that may have prompted something. Is there anyone else who would plus one that that you'd like to see more testing on materials, perhaps? And that might get at an interest of yours that you want to make sure that performance is reflected. Karen, were you going to say something?
Yeah, and I think maybe this would be a good time to have Francis talk about, the fact that how these specifications do interact with performance. Is there any downgrade.
And I'll just
Yeah,
mention before you do that, Francis, Mianda says, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, yes, testing the materials helps us install with more surety and get ahead of any constraints. Really important. Yep. Yeah, so you're on the front lines there. You're gonna really have to deal with it if something doesn't come up until it's being installed or Go
mm,
ahead.
yeah. So the global warming potential limits, uh, it's something we certainly don't want to impair using products that meet the performance needs and meet all of the technical requirements that are in the specifications, or that you have confidence in the products. Um, so we're really encouraging you to be looking at the different kinds of products you use and do have confidence in, and then picking the lowest the ones with the lowest embodied carbon, or asking the manufacturers if they can produce environmental product declarations, if they don't have them already, or even, we've been on projects where we've been able to ask, you know, do you have other products that perform just as well but have lower carbon, or what are you doing with your manufacturing processes, with the energy you use, with the kind of energy, like with kinds of energy you use, like if there's renewables and less fossil fuels. There's lots of things that manufacturers can do to lower the global warming potential, like the carbon emissions in manufacturing these products, that shouldn't impact performance. And we want this to be another um, uh, you know, attribute of the products to be looking for, because it makes such a high impact on the environment. Yeah, no, we certainly wouldn't want to impair or sacrifice any of the performance of the materials to meet this additional, um, criteria that. So there is an exceptions pathway, if you feel like that would be that situation on the project, then certainly, we encourage you to make an appeal, and there's an exceptions pathway.
Thanks, Francis. Really helpful. And yeah, we're seeing agreement in the chat. Anyone else who would plus one that kind of question or concern about performance, put that in the chat. And let's just see one last time if there are any additional barriers or information you would need before we move on to the next question. All right, thank you for your answers here. And let's move on to question number 2. We're interested, obviously there's going to be more information about low carbon materials coming out or available. We wonder how we might provide resources or information for you and other small contractors who might be interested to ensure you can have successful projects using low carbon materials. So, what channels of information would reach you? And how do you usually hear about new products or market opportunities? How can we reach you? So please speak up, unmute, say hello, or put something in the chat if you're able to help us understand about how to reach you, what channels of information might reach you, etc. I'll give you a moment to think here. How can we get more information to you? You all made your way to this webinar here, so we've reached you somehow.
Hi.
I'd
Oops, sorry.
like to say something. I
Go
mean,
ahead,
this is
David, and then we'll hear from Valerie. Yes.
I just speak on behalf of like small subcontractors and the prime contractors that shop at like Home Depot. Getting information from from vendors like that is probably the most efficient way I can see of us getting that kind of information. So working with them could be a good outlet.
Really helpful. Thanks. And we're making notes about the input that you have. So thank you. Um, and by email, thank you, Christopher, for your your information there. And if there's anywhere that you might get other information, we will certainly email you with all the information that was provided today. Valerie, you had something to add.
Yes, I'm sorry, guys. I joined in late, so I wasn't sure how far you had already um, gone and discussed the sourcing out these materials. For us, generally speaking, the materials are pretty much already decided upon by the specifications. So on the specs, there's going to be X, Y, and Z product. The steel is pre-specs, the drywall, and all of these materials. So there is not a lot of choice. We usually go for systems. So that's a problem, I think, in my industry or in any industry. I find the fact that we use systems of product that work together. If one of them is a green product, the others are not. Let's say, for example, a glue that attaches two materials, like the sound caulk, for example, which we have a great product. It's a terrible product, but it works really well. So now you have a drywall that could be a green product, but the glue inside is not. And if we switch, then we're told if it fails, it's your fault because the system. So I think that I really love the idea of the construction industry to move forward aggressively in utilizing products that are conducive to, of course, less carbon emission and also participate into even reflection. I mean, name it, all of the great ideas that are out there to help with climate change issues. But I find that at the creation of the product, where USG, for example, these are the big manufacturers, they should have a line, and we should know about that line. The architect should know about that line. And of course, yeah, Home Depot, I get it. But there's also, we need to kind of, we should be able to have access to these right off the bat. It shouldn't be an effort for us to go and source them out. They should be proposed. It's a little bit like when Title 24 came up and said, this is how we're going to regulate installing lights in a home now. And now everybody has to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's for residential, by the way. But anyway, enough talking. And maybe I'd love to hear your comments on that.
You said a lot, and it's really helpful, Valerie. Thank you. It's important for us to ground, what the specifications reflect and what we're trying to do in the realities of what you all are seeing on the ground. And that's why we wanted to talk to you today. So let's open it up. Anybody want to plus one anything that Valerie said or add some detail or say, no, it's different for me? Please jump in by voice or by chat. Mm-hmm. And Christopher, we saw your chat. We will definitely send you the information as we promised.
I'll just say from the planning side and the building owner side, we're the ones asking for this. We're going to be asking for it, from very early design through the RFP, and then it's going to be designed into the project. So just like you're saying, if the project, a lot of those decisions are made by the time it gets to you. And
that's right.
And that's part of what we're doing with this specification, is making sure it's included at the very earliest stages, so that we're not asking, we're asking you to document and find these products, but the design already incorporates it. You don't have to worry about it changing or changing the performance or changing the design at all. Yeah, those are really important comments.
So to some extent, and I think this is really, it should be really efficient. We thrive in always using even proper building practice, disposal of products, all of that. You can try really to be as conscious as possible. But at the end of the day, when we step into a project where things have been specified,
Right.
then you know because they've been specified, then they're going to be more readily available because no one wants a project that stalls because the contractor cannot find what it is they are required to find. So it kind of
Absolutely.
trickles down. I
Absolutely.
don't want to quote Confucius and say that the fish stinks from the head, but it really does. Little joke.
Yep,
But
we're
it's
very
true,
aware of
you
that.
know.
Yeah.
Force us, impose
Yeah.
it. It's got to
Yeah.
be,
Yep.
you know.
Thank you. And yeah, maybe you'll have the opportunity to look at some of the presentation later when you get the recording, and you can see how we're addressing that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We are at time. We're happy to stay on and answer any other questions. I do want to note that we do have a couple of more slides in here that you will receive, so you can click on these links. Just leading to some videos from the Carbon Leadership Forum. They have a great website and their videos. And then there's a local Build Well project from a local engineer here in Alameda County who's put together some great videos. And then we also have a bunch of other resources and links. If you're interested in this topic, I encourage you to take some time to look at these. And I think that might be it. So you'll get these links, so don't worry about writing them all down. But we want to thank you for your time today. Anything else, Sarah, to close us out?
That's it. We really thank you for all these reasons that we've just covered. You know, it's very important for us to hear from you whenever we can about how we can make this reflect all the realities on the ground. So thank you. Feel free to continue to add something quickly in the chat or hang on and talk with us by voice if you can, but we know we're at time, so we'll let you all go.
Okay, thank
Thanks all.
you. Bye.
Thank you.